Coming up on the Epoch News, Google in the spotlight after insiders and employees talk about what is really at play behind the scenes. Thanks for tuning into the Epoch News. I'm Angela Anderson. Today's story was written by Petr Svab. Google is pushing its political agenda onto its users through its products in an effort that one employee described as preventing the next Trump situation. And according to employees speaking out and internal documents, the company has cloaked its political agenda in the veneer of fairness. But in reality, it means promoting the company's political worldview at the expense of others. It also is raising voices of those aligned with its worldview at the expense of those that oppose it, or that just aren't aligned with it enough. One Google employee who wishes to remain anonymous said on Project Veritas,
"They are a highly biased political machine that is bent on never letting somebody like Donald Trump come to power again."
Google, the world's largest internet company with some 100,000 employees that make more than $130 billion a year in profit, has long been accused of channeling the politics of its mostly left-leaning workforce into its products, which the company has repeatedly denied. However, the latest revelations show a company that has given a large amount of effort in putting its thumb on the political scales after the 2016 election.
Right after Donald Trump won the election in 2016, the company did a complete 180 in what they thought was important.
The insider went on to say that after they blamed Trump's success on hate, misogyny and racism, the company decided to fix it and went on to diverge from its previous values of self-expression and giving everyone a voice. The Google employee said, "They're like, we need to start policing our users because we don't want to have an outcome like that. We don't want to have an outcome like that to happen again." A similar sentiment was expressed by Jen Genai, head of Google's Responsible Innovation, who was caught on hidden camera by a Project Veritas reporter several weeks ago.
Got screwed over in 2016. Again, it wasn't just us, it was like people got screwed over, the news media got screwed over, like everybody got screwed over, so now we're rapidly being like, what happened there? How do we prevent it from happening again?
Genai said that she used to work for Google's trust and safety team and that the 2020 presidential election has been top of mind for the team. She also said they've been working on it since 2016 to make sure we're ready for 2020. Now, the Google employee said that none of this has been disclosed by Google to its users, many of whom still consider it an objective source of information. An internal document suggests Google believes that by filtering, ranking, aggregating or generating media through its products, its users are programmed to certain worldviews. As it turned out, however, these worldviews are not always those preferred by the company. For example, when one searches on Google for CEOs, the results would likely show a lot of pictures of men because most CEOs are men. But according to an internal document, that would be algorithmic unfairness because it would reinforce a stereotype about the role of women in leadership positions. The document states it may be desirable to consider how we might help society reach a more fair and equitable state via either product intervention or broader corporate responsibility efforts. On paper, algorithmic unfairness was defined by the company as unjust, relating to sensitive characteristics such as race, income, sexual orientation or gender, though algorithmic systems or algorithmically aided decision-making. Since every person shares in such characteristics, the definition could make us believe that Google is simply trying to make sure it treats everybody fairly. But Genai made clear her job was to bring fairness only to certain people, based on whether they belong to a group Google deems sufficiently marginalised. Genai said, "My definition of fairness and bias specifically talks about historically marginalised communities, and that's who I care about. Communities who are in power and have traditionally been in power are not who I'm solving fairness for," she was recorded as saying. An insider described a Google initiative called ML Fairness. The ML stands for machine learning. The existence and purpose of ML Fairness were confirmed by Google software engineer Gaurav Gait, who was recorded describing the initiative by a Project Veritas reporter. He said it was set up to develop an artificial intelligence algorithm that would put in place Google's idea of fairness at scale. Genai also appeared to confirm that Google is going even further, looking to its algorithms for a specific political outcome.
Training our algorithms, like if 2016 happened again, would the outcome be different?
Algorithms are trained by being fed with sufficient quantities of properly classified data. If, for example, the AI is provided enough cat images classified as a cat, the machine will eventually learn to recognise almost any cat image, even one it hasn't encountered before, as a cat. But the insider said Google has been training its fairness algorithm to instead produce results that reflect the company's political views. What they're really saying about fairness is that they have to manipulate their search results so it gives them the political agenda that they want, and so they have to rebias their algorithms. In 2008, for instance, Google introduced the search suggestions function. Whenever one started to type into the Google search bar, an algorithm would draw upon signals such as the user's previous searches, searches by users worldwide, sites in Google's index, and ads in Google's network to suggest search phrases that start with the text already typed in. Google's employee said, now, however, the fairness algorithm causes the function to at least sometimes display results infused with Google's preferred worldview. For example, when one types in men can and makes a space, the suggestions would show phrases like men can have babies, men can get pregnant, and men can have periods. When one types in women can and makes a space, the suggestions would show phrases like women can vote, women can do anything, and women can be drafted. Now, this is not because these phrases are so popular among users, but because the fairness algorithm pulled them from so-called sources of truth, as it was intentionally trained to do, the insider said. The Google employee also said they are feeding the information and training the AI so that it will return results like this. Political bias in Google's search results has likely already shifted massive numbers of undecided voters, according to voluminous research on the topic by Robert Epstein, senior research psychologist at the American Institute for Behavioral Research and Technology, a California nonprofit. Project Veritas founder James O'Keefe said, maybe it is the most important issue that we've ever faced in this country for as long as it's existed. All the political advertising money spent in the entire world will not have the effect of this company modifying its algorithms. And according to the insider, the fairness algorithm is used to promote Google's agenda in multiple products, including Google News and video sharing platform YouTube, which Google owns. He said that Google assigns categories to YouTube videos based on words uttered in the videos. The fairness algorithm then elevates or buries the content based on its alignment with Google's political agenda. PragerU videos and Dave Rubin's videos were labelled right-wing and news talk and have received heightened analysis by an AI called Viacom, which, according to the insider, polices YouTube content. PragerU produces educational videos on conservative ideas. Rubin, who describes himself as a classical liberal, hosts a talk show where he says he tries to bridge ideological divides. And people who Google labels as right-wing news commentators, regardless of whether they self-identify as such, have their videos disadvantaged, the insider said, specifically mentioning Rubin, pro-Trump satirical channel Carpe Diem, centre-left commentator and journalist Tim Pool, and conservative comedian and commentator Stephen Crowder. The insider said they don't want these opinions to have wide appeal, and so they're coming in and they're putting their thumb down and they're deciding which content the users are allowed to see. Google's preference for left-leaning sources in its Google News function has been repeatedly pointed out by various media and even by the president. The Epoch Times on multiple dates tested the function by browsing Google News search results for the word Trump. Every time, only about 3 to 5% of the articles featured on the first 10 pages of the results came from traditionally conservative-leaning media. Google has maintained that it simply gives preference to more credible sources. Jenai said, "We're choosing what we define as credible news sources, and those news sources don't necessarily overlap with conservative sources." The insider said, however, that Google actually had an editorial agenda. It puts the news sources through the fairness algorithm, and if one aligns with Google's agenda, it pops the top, he said. If it doesn't, then it gets buried. Google has been accused by Republican lawmakers of political bias in its products, but Jenai said the company is unresponsive to Congress's criticism. Jenai said they can pressure us, but we're not changing. And it's not that the company is unaware that its fairness doctrine is far from universal. The same people who voted for the current president do not agree with our definition of fairness. And that's all for today's news report, folks. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic below. And don't forget to follow along with the Epoch News channel by subscribing and hitting the notifications button. I'm Angela Anderson. We'll see you tomorrow.